Open Unity in Assets folder, create a new folder, and rename it to Light On Off Logic. Open it. In this tutorial, we will recreate the previous tutorial Light On Off by using logic assets instead of using states inclusion and states changer components. First of all, create a scene and rename it to Light On Off Logic. Now we need to create a finite state machine blueprint. Right-click in Project Manager panel and select Create Wings Production Finite State Machine. Choose Save Folder window appears. Choose our Light On Off Logic folder and rename the asset to StateMachine_LightOnOffLogic.asset. We need an empty game object that will hold the state machinery, so let's create one. Reset its transform in Inspector panel and rename it to State Machinery Holder or SM Holder. Create a prefab of it. Select SM Holder prefab and add State Machinery component. Drag our State Machine underline Light On Off Logic asset in the State Machine field and check is Global Checker because we will use it globally. Now the machinery will work according to the assigned blueprint. Let's design our state machine blueprint now. Open our FSM asset in S-Machine Editor by double-clicking on it. As we can see, our blueprint has only one state named Default. Rename it to Light Off. Now right-click in Empty Space and then select Create State Empty. Rename the new state to Light On. Make transitions from one to another by right-clicking on the state nodes and choose Make Transition, and drag towards opposite node on each of the nodes. Now we need to declare the event when invoked will trigger state transitions. Click on the closed eye icon in the upper left corner of S-Machine Editor. New panel opens with Events tab selected. It says that a list is empty. We have no declared events. Let's declare some. Click on the plus sign. A new field named New Condition Event appears. Rename it to Light On Event. Click on the plus sign one more time and add Light Off Event as a name. We must assign those events as conditions to the transitions that we have made before. Select Light On to Light Off transition. In the Inspector panel, we can see that Conditions list is empty. Click on the plus sign. The drop-down menu appears. Choose Light Off Event because by invoking this event we will transit from on to off state. Now choose the other transition and for its condition choose Light On Event. We have designed and set up our state machine. We can now go further. It is time to create some UI that will change states of our state machine. Create a canvas and two buttons. Rename the buttons to On button and Off button, as well as their text to On and Off accordingly. Make Canvas prefabs. It is time to create some logic magic. Let's start with the On button. It needs to be visible in light off state and on click to change from off to on state, which means it needs to invoke a light on event. Also, it needs to be invisible in light on state. For these purposes, we will need to create two different logic blueprints. One for when the button is visible will be logic underline on visible.asset, and the other one will be logic underline on invisible.asset. Let's assign them to On button. Select its prefab and lock the right inspector panel. Add component logic. Drag logic underline on visible.asset to logic field. Expand StateMachine inclusion section. Select SM holder prefab and drag StateMachinery component from left inspector panel to StateMachinery field in right inspector panel. Expand include in states section. The list is empty. Click the plus sign and from the drop-down menu choose Light Off State. We have included the logic and light off state. Now we need to create and include another logic and light on state. Select logic underline on visible.asset in Logic Editor. Add component listen event to listen if the button is clicked. Right-click on its title and select UI pointer click. Next, when button is clicked, we need to trigger the StateMachine transition by satisfying StateMachine condition by invoking light on event. StateMachine will transit from off to on state. OK. Add invoke event component. Drag StateMachine into Logic Editor. Connect StateMachine reference node output point to event to invoke input point of invoke event node. Check Invoke on Enable checker. Select Connection and choose Light On event. Connect BSuccess of Listen event node to BEnable input point of invoke event node. The button click success will enable invoking Light On event. We need one more thing for this logic blueprint. Add model component. Right-click on title, add bool, output name on. We will keep checker checked as we want the button to be visible when logic became active. Drag On button prefab in Logic Editor to make a reference of it. add one more logic component and, as we have previously seen, assign state machinery and now include logic and light on state. For the blueprint, choose logic underline on invisible.asset. Select SM holder prefab and drag state machinery component from left inspector panel to state machinery field and right inspector panel. Select logic underline on invisible.asset and drag on button prefab in logic editor to make a reference of it. Now add model component. Right-click on title, add bool, output name on, we will keep checker unchecked as we want the button to be invisible when logic became active. Create two more logic blueprints for off button. Name them logic underline off visible.asset and logic underline off invisible.asset. Assign each of logic underline off visible.asset and logic underline off invisible.asset to logic components of off button and set up as an on button. Note that logic underline off visible.asset should be included light off state and logic underline off invisible.asset in light on state. Select logic underline off visible.asset in logic editor, add component listen event to listen if the button is clicked. Right-click on its title and select UI pointer click. Next, when the button is clicked, we need to trigger state machine transition by satisfying the state machine condition, by invoking light off event. The state machine will transit from on to off state. OK. Add invoke event component. Drag state machine into logic editor. Connect state machine reference node output point to event to invoke input point of invoke event node. Select connection and choose light off event. Connect B success of listen event node to B enable input point of invoke event node. The button click success will enable invoking light off event. We need one more thing for this logic blueprint. Add a model component. Right-click on Title, Add Bool, Output Name On. Check On Checker so the button is visible when logic becomes active. Drag Off Button Prefab in Logic Editor to make a reference of it. Select Logic _Off Invisible.Asset. Drag Off Button Prefab in Logic Editor to make a reference of it. Now add Model Component. Right-click on Title, Add Bool, Output Name On. We will keep the checker unchecked as we want the button to be invisible. We need to create 2 more logic blueprints for the directional light. Name them Logic_Light Visible.Asset and Logic_Light Invisible.Asset. Make a prefab of directional light. Assign them as in the previous cases. It needs to be visible in light on state and invisible in light off state. Select Logic_Light Visible.Asset. Drag Directional Light Prefab to Logic Editor to make its reference. In the Model component, check On Checker. Select Logic_Light Invisible.Asset. We are ready to swap prefab with prefab instances. After we have done that, we can hit play. Everything works correctly. That's all. May the Logic Forge be with you.